The December wind howled across the Colorado plains like a wounded animal, carrying with it the promise of another harsh winter. Cora pressed herself deeper into the corner of the rickety stagecoach, her thin shawl, more holes than fabric, pulled tight around her shoulders. The other passengers had long since stopped trying to make conversation with the young woman who seemed determined to disappear into herself. Through the frost-covered window, she caught her first glimpse of Willow Creek, if it could even be called a town. A handful of weathered buildings huddled together against the endless expanse of prairie, as if seeking comfort from each other in the face of such desolation. There was Mackenzie's General Store, its painted sign faded to near illegibility, a saloon called the Dusty Boot, and a small church whose steeple pointed accusingly at the gray sky. The coach lurched to a stop, and the driver's gruff voice cut through the wind. "Willow Creek! End of the line for some of you folks." Cora's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it, the end of her journey, the beginning of… what? She didn't even know the name of the man who had paid for her passage, who had answered her desperate advertisement in the Matrimonial Gazette. His letters had been brief, practical. Need a wife, hard work, no questions about the past. Room, board, and respect provided. E.T. She was the last to disembark, her worn boots hitting the frozen ground with a soft thud. The few townspeople who had gathered to meet the stage cast curious glances her way. She heard the whispers start immediately, saw the way the women's eyes traveled over her threadbare dress, the dirt under her fingernails, the hollowness of her cheeks. That the mail-order bride? Lord have mercy, look at the state of her. Eli Thatcher's getting more than he bargained for, I reckon. Eli Thatcher. So that was his name. She stood there, a solitary figure beside her pathetic bundle of belongings, everything she owned wrapped in a piece of burlap, and searched the small crowd for a face that might belong to her future husband. The wind cut through her dress like 1,000 tiny knives, but she forced herself to remain still, to keep her chin raised despite every instinct screaming at her to run, to hide, to disappear. Then she saw him. He stood apart from the others, leaning against a post outside the general store, tall and lean, with a kind of weathered face that spoke of too many years under an unforgiving sun. His hat was pulled low, but she could see his eyes, gray as the winter sky, studying her with an intensity that made her stomach tighten. He wore a long duster coat over work clothes that had seen better days, and his boots were caked with mud. Not a rich man. Then, but she hadn't expected rich. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other across the dusty street. Then he pushed off from the post and walked toward her with the measured gait of a man who had learned not to rush anything in life. The crowd parted before him, their whispers following in his wake. He stopped 3 feet from her, close enough that she could smell the leather and tobacco on him, far enough to maintain propriety. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the streak of premature gray in his dark beard. 40, maybe 45, old enough to be settled in his ways, young enough to still need a wife. "Miss Sullivan?" His voice was low, rough as sandpaper. She nodded, not trusting her own voice. "Eli Thatcher." He didn't offer his hand, didn't smile, just stood there, taking her measure with those storm-colored eyes. She wondered what he saw, a scarecrow of a woman, all sharp bones and haunted eyes. Or did he see past that to the steel underneath, the part of her that had survived things that should have killed her? "The wagon's this way," he said finally. Reaching for her bundle, she clutched it tighter for a moment, an instinctive reaction, then forced herself to let go. He hefted it easily, it weighed almost nothing, and turned toward a wagon hitched to 2 patient horses. She followed him, aware of every eye in town tracking their progress. Her legs felt unsteady after days of travel, and hunger gnawed at her belly like a living thing. When had she last eaten? 2 days ago? 3? The memories blurred together. He helped her up onto the wagon seat with surprising gentleness, his hand at her elbow just long enough to steady her. Then he climbed up beside her, took the reins, and clicked to the horses. They moved forward, leaving Willow Creek and its gossiping inhabitants behind. The silence stretched between them as the wagon rolled along the rutted track. Cora kept her eyes forward, watching the landscape unfold. Endless grass bent low by the wind, distant mountains purple against the horizon, and a sky so vast it made her feel like she might fall upward into it, so different from the cramped, filthy places she'd known. "Ranch is about 5 miles out," Eli said eventually. "Nothing fancy. House, barn, some outbuildings. Run about 50 head of cattle. Some horses. Got a man who helps out during roundup. But mostly it's just me. Just him. And now her. I can work," she said, the words coming out hoarse from disuse. "I'm stronger than I look." He glanced at her sideways, and she thought she saw something flicker in his eyes, doubt, maybe, or pity. But all he said was, "We'll see." The sun was beginning its descent when they crested a low hill and the ranch came into view. Cora's heart sank. He hadn't lied. It wasn't fancy. The main house was built of rough-hewn logs, small and sturdy, with a chimney that leaked a thin stream of smoke. The barn looked more substantial than the house, and she could see a chicken coop, a well, and what might have been a root cellar. Everything had the worn, practical look of a place where survival took precedence over comfort. "It ain't much," Eli said, as if reading her thoughts. "But it's solid. Built it myself, mostly. Keeps the weather out." "It's fine," she said quickly. After where she'd been, anywhere with 4 walls and a roof was paradise. He pulled the wagon up in front of the house and helped her down. A few chickens scattered at their approach, clucking their displeasure. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed. The wind had picked up, bringing with it the smell of snow. Inside, the house was sparse but clean. One main room served as kitchen and living space, with a large fireplace at one end and a simple table and chairs at the other. A ladder led up to what must be a loft, and there was one door that probably led to a bedroom. Everything was functional, masculine, with no trace of a woman's touch. Eli set her bundle on the table and moved to the fireplace, adding wood to the dying embers. "You can have the bedroom," he said without looking at her. "I'll take the loft." Relief flooded through her, followed quickly by confusion. Wasn't she here to be his wife in all ways? But she wasn't about to question this unexpected reprieve. "Are you hungry?" he asked, and she nodded before she could stop herself. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford anymore. He moved to the stove with practiced efficiency, and soon the smell of frying salt pork filled the small space. He added cornbread to the pan, poured coffee from a pot that seemed to live permanently on the back of the stove. It was simple fare, but to Cora it smelled like a feast. They ate in silence, him at one end of the table, her at the other. She forced herself to eat slowly, though every instinct screamed at her to wolf down the food before it could be taken away. He didn't watch her eat, didn't ask questions, just worked his way methodically through his own plate. When they were finished, she started to rise to clear the dishes, but he waved her back. "You're dead on your feet. Bedroom's through there. There's water in the pitcher for washing. We'll sort out the rest tomorrow." She hesitated in the doorway, looking back at this strange, silent man who was now her husband. "Mr. Thatcher. Eli," he corrected. "Eli, thank you for—" She gestured helplessly, encompassing the food, the shelter, the lack of questions. He just nodded and turned back to the dishes. The bedroom was small and plain, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a few pegs on the wall for clothes. But the quilt on the bed was clean, and the mattress, when she sank onto it, was soft. She washed her face and hands with the cold water, changed into her one other dress, equally worn but marginally cleaner, and crawled under the covers. For a long time, she lay there listening to the sounds of Eli moving around in the main room, the creak of floorboards, the clink of dishes, then his footsteps on the ladder, and the house settled into quiet except for the wind rattling the windows. She should have been afraid. She was alone in a strange place with a man she didn't know, miles from anywhere, with no money and nowhere to run if things went bad, but somehow, inexplicably, she felt safer than she had in years. Maybe it was exhaustion, Or maybe it was something about Eli Thatcher's quiet presence, the way he looked at her, really looked at her, without judgment or hunger or cruelty. Through the thin walls, she heard him moving around in the loft, the creak of rope bed as he settled in. For several minutes after that, nothing. Then the soft sound of footsteps above her, pacing, back and forth, back and forth. Finally, they stopped near what must be the top of the ladder. She held her breath, wondering if he would come down, if the reprieve was over. But after a moment, the footsteps retreated. The bed creaked again, and silence fell. Outside, snow began to fall. Soft white flakes that would cover the harsh landscape in a blanket of temporary beauty. Tomorrow would bring questions, expectations, the reality of what she'd signed up for. But tonight, for the first time in longer than she could remember, Cora Thatcher now, closed her eyes and slept without fear. The rooster's crow pierced through Cora's dreams like a rusty blade. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. The narrow bed, the unfamiliar quilt, the silence that wasn't filled with shouting or crying or the clank of iron bars. Then it all came rushing back. Colorado, the ranch, Eli Thatcher. She dressed quickly in the cold room, her fingers fumbling with buttons. Through the small window, she could see fresh snow blanketing the ground, turning the harsh landscape into something almost gentle. The sun was just beginning to pink the eastern sky. When she emerged from the bedroom, Eli was already up, stoking the fire. He glanced at her briefly, nodded, then returned to his task. On the table sat a cup of steaming coffee and a plate with biscuits and preserved peaches. "Didn't know when you'd wake," he said without turning around. "Coffee's fresh." She sat and ate in silence, watching him work. He moved with economy, every gesture purposeful. When he finally sat across from her with his own coffee, she forced herself to speak. "What would you like me to do first?" He studied her over the rim of his cup. "You know how to tend chickens?" "Yes." "Good. They need feeding. Scratches in the barn. Buckets by the door. Check for eggs while you're at it. After that—" He paused, seeming to weigh his words. "Can you cook?" "Some. I can learn what I don't know." "Fair enough. Wells out back for water. Root cellar's got potatoes, carrots, onions, some preserved goods. We eat simple here." She nodded, already mentally cataloging tasks. Work she could do. Work was safer than stillness. Safer than thinking. The chickens scattered when she approached, then quickly converged when they realized she carried food. She scattered the grain, located 4 eggs nestled in the straw, and carefully carried them back to the house. Such a small thing, gathering eggs. But it felt like an accomplishment. The days fell into a pattern. She rose with the sun, made coffee, prepared breakfast, while Eli tended the cattle and horses. She cleaned the house, though there was little to clean. He was a tidy man. She learned where things were kept, the rhythm of the stove's temperament, which floorboards creaked. They spoke little those first weeks, communicating mainly in gestures and glances. He never asked about her past, never demanded anything beyond the work she did. In the evenings, he would sit by the fire cleaning tack or mending harnesses while she darned socks or worked on patching her threadbare clothes with scraps she found in an old trunk. It was during the 3rd week that the first crack appeared in their careful silence. A late winter storm howled outside, rattling the windows and sending drafts through every tiny gap in the walls. Eli had been out checking the cattle, making sure none had wandered into danger, and he came back covered in snow, his lips blue with cold. "Storm's getting worse," he said, stomping his boots at the door. "Might be snowed in for a few days." As he shrugged out of his wet coat, Cora noticed him wince, his hand going to his left shoulder. "You're hurt," she said, starting forward. "It's nothing. Horse spooked. Caught me against the fence." But when he tried to lift his arm, his face went white. "Sit," she ordered, surprising them both with the firmness in her voice. "Let me see." He hesitated, then slowly sat in the chair by the fire. She helped him ease out of his shirt, trying not to notice the lean muscles, the scars that spoke of a hard life. His shoulder was already purple with bruising, swollen. "Don't think it's broken," he muttered. "Just banged up." She fetched snow from outside, wrapped it in a cloth. When she pressed it to his shoulder, he sucked in a breath but didn't pull away. She stood close, closer than she'd been to him since that first day, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his skin, to smell the mix of horse and leather and something uniquely him. "Hold this here," she said, guiding his hand to the compress. Their fingers brushed, and she jerked back as if burned. That night, she made a heartier stew than usual, adding extra vegetables and the last of the salt pork. He ate one-handed, his left arm held stiff against his side. When he struggled to cut his bread, she reached over and did it for him without comment. "Thank you," he said quietly. After supper, she insisted on checking his shoulder again. The swelling had gone down some, but the bruising looked worse in the lamplight. She found an old sheet, tore it into strips, and fashioned a sling. "You don't have to," he started. "Yes, I do. You can't work the ranch one-handed. The sooner this heals, the better for both of us." He submitted to her ministrations, watching her face as she worked. "You've done this before," he observed. Her hand stilled for just a moment. "Yes," was all she said. That night, the wind howled like a living thing. She woke sometime after midnight to find the fire had died to embers and the house had grown bitter cold. She could hear Eli moving around in the loft, probably unable to sleep with his injured shoulder. Without overthinking it, she rose and rebuilt the fire, adding log after log until it blazed high. Then she heated water and made tea with some of the herbs she'd found dried in the pantry, chamomile and something else that might help with pain. "Eli," she called softly, "I've made tea." There was silence. Then the creak of the ladder. He descended carefully, favoring his left side, wearing only his pants and undershirt. In the firelight, he looked younger, more vulnerable. They sat by the fire, sipping tea in companionable silence. The storm raged outside, but inside felt safe, warm. "Why did you advertise for a wife?" The question escaped before she could stop it. He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Ranch is too much for one person. Tried hiring help, but they never stay. Too isolated out here, too hard. Figured a wife. Figured someone who had a stake in the place might stick around." "Is that all?" She couldn't help pushing, even though she knew she had no right. He looked at her then, really looked at her. "Gets lonely," he said simply. "Talking to cattle ain't much for conversation." She almost smiled at that. "And you picked me because you didn't lie in your letter. Didn't paint yourself as something you weren't. Didn't ask for promises I couldn't keep. Just said you needed a place and weren't afraid of work." He paused. That kind of honesty is rare. They lapsed back into silence, but it was different now, softer somehow. When she yawned, he gestured toward the bedroom. "Get some rest. I'll sit up a while longer." "Your shoulder has hurt worse. Go on." But she paused in the doorway. "That first night, you stood outside my door. Why?" He didn't pretend not to understand. "Wanted to make sure you felt safe, that you knew I wouldn't, that you could sleep without worry." Something tight in her chest loosened a fraction. "I did sleep without worry. I mean, first time in a long time." The look he gave her then was so gentle it made her throat close up. She fled to the bedroom before she could say anything else. The storm lasted 3 days. 3 days where the outside world ceased to exist, where it was just the two of them in their small shelter against the wild. Eli's shoulder slowly improved, though she insisted on checking it daily, changing the compress, adjusting the sling. They began to talk more. Nothing deep. He told her about the cattle, about which horses had which temperaments, about the best times for planting the small vegetable garden. She shared recipes her grandmother had taught her, before everything went wrong. Described the flowers she'd like to plant come spring, if he didn't mind. On the third night, as the storm finally began to die down, he was teaching her to play checkers on a board he'd carved himself. She was losing badly, but didn't mind. It had been so long since she'd done something just for the pleasure of it. "You let your guard down here," he said, jumping 2 of her pieces. "Gotta think ahead. Watch for attacks from angles you don't expect." "Story of my life," she muttered without thinking. His hand paused over the board. "Cora, your move," she said quickly, not meeting his eyes. He made his move in silence. But later, as they were putting the board away, he said quietly, "Everybody's running from something. Question is whether you're running to something better or just running." She looked up at him then. This man who'd taken her in without questions, who slept in a cold loft so she could have the bedroom, who stood guard outside her door to make sure she felt safe. "I'm not running anymore," she said. "Good," he replied. "Neither am I." That night, she heard him pacing in the loft again, but this time, it didn't frighten her. Instead, she found herself thinking about his injured shoulder, wondering if it pained him, fighting the urge to call up and ask if he needed anything. When morning came, breaking brilliant and clear after the storm, they ventured out together to check the damage. A few fence posts down, one of the chicken coop boards loose, but nothing that couldn't be fixed. They worked side by side in the crisp air, their breath making clouds. And Cora realized with a start that she was almost happy. That evening, as she served supper, Eli cleared his throat. "You're a good cook," he said. "Better than me by far." "It's just stew," she protested. "Maybe, but it's good stew." He paused, then added, "This place already feels different with you here. Better." Heat flooded her cheeks. She busied herself with her own plate, unsure how to respond to kindness. It had been so long since anyone had offered it freely, without expectation of payment. After supper, instead of retreating to opposite ends of the room as usual, they both ended up by the fire. She had found a book of poetry in the trunk with the fabric scraps. Byron. The pages yellowed and worn. She'd been reading it in stolen moments, hungry for words that weren't orders or accusations. "You can read it aloud if you want," Eli said, noticing her holding the book. "I don't mind." "You like poetry?" "Don't know. Never had much chance to hear any. Might be nice, though." So she read, her voice tentative at first, then growing stronger. He listened with his eyes closed, and she thought he might have fallen asleep until he asked her to read one particular passage again, when she finally closed the book. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't decipher. "You read well," he said. "Bet you had schooling, once upon a time?" "Some," she admitted. "Before." She stopped, the words dying in her throat. "Before whatever happened that brought you here," he finished gently. "It's all right. We've all got befores." She wanted to tell him then. The words pressed against her teeth, desperate to escape. But fear held her back. This fragile peace they'd built, what if the truth shattered it? Instead, she said, "I should turn in early morning tomorrow." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Cora, I'm glad you answered my advertisement. Want you to know that—" She paused at the bedroom door, looking back at him silhouetted by firelight. "So am I," she whispered, and meant it. Spring came slowly to the Colorado plains, revealing itself in tiny increments. A blade of green grass here, a tentative wildflower there. The snow retreated to the shadowed places, and the air lost some of its bitter edge. It had been 3 months since Cora arrived, and the ranch had settled into a rhythm that felt almost like belonging. "Need supplies," Eli announced one morning over breakfast. "Figure it's time you saw the town proper, met some folks." Cora's hand stilled over her coffee cup. She'd known this day would come, but that didn't make it easier. "Is that necessary?" He looked at her steadily. "Can't hide out here forever. Besides, you'll need fabric if you're going to make new clothes like you mentioned." She had mentioned it, tentatively. After patching her dress so many times, it was more thread than original fabric. He'd noticed, of course. He noticed everything, though he rarely commented. The ride to town was quiet, but it was their usual comfortable silence now, not the wary distance of those first weeks. Eli had taught her to drive the wagon, and she held the reins while he sat beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. Willow Creek looked exactly as she remembered, weather-beaten and sparse, clinging to existence through sheer stubbornness. But this time, she noticed things she'd missed in her terror that first day. Window boxes on some houses waiting for spring flowers, children playing in yards, signs of life and hope. At the general store, Eli introduced her to Sam Mackenzie, the proprietor, a thin man with kind eyes who greeted her warmly. "Mrs. Thatcher, glad to finally meet you proper. Eli here's been keeping you all to himself." She managed a small smile, unused to being addressed as Mrs. Thatcher. They still slept in separate rooms, still navigated around each other with careful courtesy. Wife in name only, though something in Eli's eyes lately made her wonder if he wanted more, made her wonder if she did too. While Eli discussed feed prices with Sam, she wandered to the fabric bolts. Such luxury, to choose material, to imagine creating something new instead of endlessly mending the old. She was running her fingers over a practical brown calico when she heard it, a voice that made her blood turn to ice. "Well, I'll be damned. Cora Sullivan." She turned slowly, her heart hammering. "Mrs." Harriet Claiborne stood there, older and grayer, but unmistakably the woman who'd run the boarding house in Cheyenne, the boarding house where everything had gone wrong. "It's Thatcher now," Cora managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Is it now?" Harriet's eyes glittered with malicious interest. "Married Eli Thatcher, did you? Poor man. Does he know what kind of woman he's tied himself to?" "Please," Cora whispered. "That was all a mistake. I never—" "Mistake?" Harriet's voice rose. "Margaret Donnelly is dead, and you ran off in the night like the guilty creature you are. We all knew you killed her for that pittance she kept hidden in her room." "I didn't kill anyone." The words came out stronger now, anger beginning to override fear. "Margaret died of a heart ailment. The doctor said so. After you'd been alone with her, after you'd served her tea." Other shoppers were beginning to stare. Cora felt the walls closing in, the familiar panic rising. Then Eli was there, his hand on her elbow, steady and grounding. "Mrs. Claiborne," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I believe you're mistaken about my wife." Harriet sniffed. "I know what I know. That girl was accused of murder. There's paper on her from Wyoming. Then why wasn't she arrested here?" Eli's logic was calm, cutting. "If there was real evidence, seems the law would have been waiting when she stepped off that stage. The law doesn't always work proper out here, and you know it. But mark my words, Eli Thatcher, that girl brings death with her. Don't come crying when— That's enough." His voice cut like a whip. "You'll speak respectfully of my wife, or you won't speak at all." He guided Cora out of the store, leaving their supplies behind. She was shaking so hard she could barely climb into the wagon. Eli took the reins this time, clicking to the horses. They were a mile out of town before he spoke. "You want to tell me what that was about?" "You heard her," Cora said dully. "I'm accused of murder. Are you guilty?" The simple question made her look at him in surprise. "You're actually asking? Not just assuming?" "I've lived with you 3 months. Watched you gentle a spooked horse, seen you coax the chickens to eat from your hand, noticed how you save scraps for the barn cats even when we're low on food ourselves. Don't figure a cold-blooded killer would bother with such things." Tears burned her eyes. "I worked at Harriet's boarding house in Cheyenne, cleaned, cooked, served meals. Margaret Donnelly was one of the boarders, an elderly woman, always kind to me. She used to slip me extra coins when Harriet wasn't looking." She paused, gathering courage. Eli waited, patient as always. One night, Margaret asked me to bring her tea. She wasn't feeling well. Hadn't been for weeks. I brought it, sat with her a while. She was telling me about her daughter in California, showing me photographs. Then she gasped, clutched her chest, and just died. Right there, holding my hand. The memory still haunted her, Margaret's eyes going wide, then empty, her grip slowly loosening. I ran for help, but Harriet claimed I'd poisoned her. Said I'd done it to steal the money Margaret kept in a box under her bed. The sheriff came, but the doctor said it was her heart. Still, Harriet kept spreading stories, turning the whole town against me. Then someone broke into my room one night, and I knew I had to run. I had nothing, no money, no family, nowhere to go. That's when I saw your advertisement. They'd reached the ranch. Eli stopped the wagon but didn't move to get down. Why didn't the law come after you? Because there was no evidence. The doctor wouldn't sign off on murder, and they never found any poison. But out here, gossip is as good as gospel. Harriet made sure everyone believed her version. And the money was still in Margaret's box when they searched. I never touched it. She turned to look at him. I swear to you, Eli, I've done things I'm not proud of to survive, but I've never killed anyone. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. I believe you. The simple words broke something open inside her. She pressed her hands to her face, trying to hold back the sob building in her chest. How can you just believe me? Because I've known killers, rode with some, back in my younger days. You're not one of them. He climbed down from the wagon, came around to her side. Come on, let's get inside. But she couldn't move, couldn't stop the tears that had finally broken free. Months of fear and running and expecting the worst had caught up to her all at once. Cora. His voice was gentle. You're safe here. I won't let anyone hurt you. You can't promise that. If they come with papers, if someone decides to pursue it, then we'll deal with it. Together. Together. The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. She let him help her down from the wagon, let him guide her inside. He poured whiskey, something he rarely did, and pressed a glass into her hands. Drink. You're shaking like a leaf. The whiskey burned, but it helped steady her nerves. They sat at the table, the afternoon sun slanting through the windows. There's more, she said quietly. Other things in my past that aren't pretty. We all have those. My father died when I was 12. My mother remarried a man named Carl Mason. She took another sip of whiskey. He had expectations of what a stepdaughter should provide. When I refused, he sold me to a man who ran a workhouse in Denver, said I'd work off the debt he'd invented. Eli's knuckles went white around his glass, but he didn't interrupt. I spent 2 years in that place, sewing until my fingers bled, sleeping in a room with 20 other girls, eating whatever scraps they gave us. Finally managed to escape, but I had nowhere to go. That's how I ended up at Harriet's. Thought I'd finally found honest work, a safe place. Then Margaret died, and I was running again. Your stepfather still alive? The dangerous note in his voice made her look up. I don't know. Don't care. If he ever shows up here, he won't. He's probably drunk himself to death by now. She managed a weak smile. You see, you married a woman with more baggage than a freight train. I married a survivor. He corrected. Nothing shameful in that. They sat in silence as the shadows lengthened. Finally, Cora asked, what do we do about town? Harriet will have spread the story to everyone by now. Let her talk. Those who matter will see through it. Sam Mackenzie's a fair man, and Doc Brennan's word carries weight. He won't stand for false accusations. And if someone comes looking, if Wyoming decides to pursue it, then I'll wire my lawyer in Denver. Man owes me a favor or two. At her surprised look, he almost smiled. What, you think I've always been a simple rancher? I'm starting to think there's nothing simple about you, Eli Thatcher. That night, she couldn't sleep. The walls felt like they were closing in, the way they had in the workhouse, in the jail cell where she'd spent 3 terrifying days before the doctor insisted she be released. She rose and padded to the main room, needing space, air, something. Eli was there, sitting by the dying fire. He looked up when she entered. Can't sleep either. I keep thinking I should run, pack up and disappear before I bring more trouble to your door. Is that what you want? She thought about it, really thought about it. No, for the first time in my life, I want to stay somewhere. I want to wake up in the same place, see the same faces, build something real, but wanting and deserving are different things. He stood, crossed to where she hovered in the doorway. "Cora, look at me." She raised her eyes to his, saw something there that made her breath catch. "You deserve peace. You deserve safety. You deserve a life without looking over your shoulder. I can't promise it'll be easy, but I can promise you won't face it alone. Not anymore." "Why?" The word came out broken. "Why do you care what happens to me?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Because you make this place feel less empty. Because you hum when you're happy and don't know I'm listening. Because you talk to the horses like they're old friends. Because despite everything you've been through, you still have kindness in you. That's rare. Cora, that's worth protecting." She didn't realize she was crying until he reached out, thumb gently brushing away a tear. The touch was electric, sending shivers through her whole body. They stood there, inches apart, the air between them charged with possibility. Then he stepped back, cleared his throat. "You should try to sleep. Tomorrow we'll go back to town, hold our heads high, show them Cora Thatcher isn't going anywhere." She nodded, not trusting her voice. But as she turned to go, she paused. "Eli, thank you for believing me, for standing by me, for everything." "Always," he said simply, and she knew he meant it. Back in her room, she pressed her fingers to her cheek where he'd touched her, feeling the ghost of his warmth. Outside, an owl called across the darkness, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote answered. The world was still wild and uncertain, but for the first time in years, Cora Sullivan Thatcher felt like she might have found a place to stand and fight rather than run. Tomorrow would bring challenges. Harriet's poison would spread, and there would be those who believed it. But tonight, she had a roof over her head, a man who stood by her, and the faintest hope that she might deserve both. It was enough. For now, it was everything. The summer heat had settled over the ranch like a heavy blanket, making the air shimmer and dance above the prairie grass. It had been 2 months since the confrontation with Harriet Claiborne, and while some in town still whispered when Cora passed, others had begun to nod politely, even smile. Sam Mackenzie always had a kind word, and Doc Brennan had made a point of publicly declaring that Margaret Donnelly died of natural causes, putting at least some rumors to rest. But the careful distance between Cora and Eli remained, a chasm neither seemed able to cross. They worked together seamlessly now. She knew his routines, could predict his needs before he voiced them. Yet, at night, they still retreated to separate rooms, bound by marriage but divided by unspoken fears. The tension had been building for weeks, showing in small ways. The lingering glances when they passed in doorways, the way his hand would almost touch hers when she handed him his coffee, then pull back, the way she found herself watching him work from the window, admiring the sure movements of his hands, the strength in his shoulders. It came to a head on a sweltering July evening. They'd worked hard all day, Eli repairing fences while Cora tended the garden that had flourished under her care. By sunset, they were both exhausted, covered in dust and sweat. Eli had drawn water for a bath, heating it on the stove as he always did for her once a week. "You go first," he said, as usual. "You need it more than I do," she protested, noting the dirt caked on his arms, the sweat-stained shirt. "Ladies first, always." Something in her snapped. "I'm not a lady. Eli, haven't you figured that out by now? I'm just a woman who survived things no lady should have to survive." He set down the bucket he was carrying, turned to face her fully. "You're my wife, in my house. That makes you a lady. Your wife." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "We've been married 5 months, and we've never... She gestured helplessly between them. "Is that what you want?" His voice had gone very quiet. The question hung in the air between them. Cora felt her cheeks burn, but she forced herself to hold his gaze. "I don't know what I want. I only know this halfway existence is killing me. Either be my husband or don't, but stop looking at me like..." "Like what?" "Like you're drowning and I'm the shore you can't quite reach." He crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping just short of touching her. You think this has been easy for me? You think I don't lie awake every night knowing you're just beyond that wall? But I've seen what happens when men take what they want without caring about the consequences. I won't be that man. Not with you. I'm not some fragile thing that needs protecting, she said, her voice rising. I've survived worse than you can imagine. I know that. God, Cora, don't you see? That's exactly why. You've had enough of men taking from you. I won't be another one. What if I want to give? The words seemed to surprise them both. Eli's breath caught, his eyes darkening. Cora. She stepped closer, eliminating the last of the distance between them. I'm not afraid of you. Eli, I haven't been for months. The only thing I'm afraid of is spending the rest of my life wondering what it would be like to truly be your wife. He raised his hand slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her cheek. She leaned into the touch, her eyes fluttering closed. You're sure? Instead of answering, she turned her head and pressed her lips to his palm. He made a sound low in his throat, and then his other hand was tangling in her hair, tilting her face up to his. The first kiss was tentative, a question more than a statement. She answered by pressing closer, her hands fisting in his shirt. The second kiss was deeper, hungrier, months of restraint crumbling in an instant. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Cora, he said again, her name like a prayer on his lips. The water's getting cold, she said, trying for practical but achieving something closer to breathless. Let it. He kissed her again, backing her against the wall, his hands framing her face like she was something precious. I've wanted this for so long. Wanted you. Then have me, she whispered against his mouth. I'm already yours. He pulled back enough to look into her eyes, searching. Whatever he found there must have satisfied him, because he took her hand and led her to his room. Their room now. The fading sunlight painted everything golden through the windows. Eli's hands shook slightly as he began unbuttoning her dress, each button revealing another inch of skin he treated with reverent touches. Cora had expected to feel afraid when this moment came, but there was no fear, only a bone-deep certainty that this was right. When her dress pooled at her feet, she reached for his shirt in turn. The scars she'd glimpsed before were fully visible now, a map of hard living written on his skin. She traced one with her fingertip, a long silver line across his ribs. Cattle stampede, he said softly. When I was 20, she pressed her lips to it, felt him shudder. And this, her fingers found another mark on his shoulder. Bullet, bar fight in Dodge City. He caught her hand, brought it to his lips. Ancient history. Nothing matters before you. They came together slowly, carefully, like two people learning a new language. Eli was infinitely gentle, constantly checking her face for any sign of distress. But Cora felt no distress, only wonder at the tenderness in his touches, the way he whispered her name like a benediction, the feeling of being cherished rather than claimed. Later, as they lay entwined in the gathering darkness, Cora traced lazy patterns on his chest. Was I? She couldn't finish the question, suddenly shy. He tilted her chin up, kissed her softly. Perfect. You're perfect. I'm far from perfect. Perfect for me. Then, he pulled her closer, and she felt safe in a way she'd never experienced before. Stay here tonight. Every night. Yes, she agreed, burrowing into his warmth. No more walls between us. They dozed for a while, then rose to deal with practical matters, the bathwater, supper, the animals that needed tending. But everything felt different now. Each casual touch held promise. Each glance sparked heat. They moved around each other with a new awareness, a new intimacy. As Cora prepared a simple meal, Eli came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. I should have done this months ago, he murmured into her hair. You weren't ready. Neither was I. She leaned back into his embrace. We needed time to trust. And now? Now I trust you with everything. My past, my present, my future. He turned her in his arms, kissed her deeply. I'll be worthy of that trust. I swear it. They ate dinner close together, their knees touching under the table, hands finding excuses to meet and linger. When darkness fell completely, they returned to bed, this time with no hesitation. The second time was different from the first, less tentative, more confident. They were learning each other's rhythms, discovering what brought pleasure, what brought sighs and gasps and breathless laughter. I never knew it could be like this, Cora admitted in the quiet aftermath. Gentle and fierce all at once. Eli's arms tightened around her. This is how it should be, how it will be, always. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Cora woke to find Eli watching her, his expression soft with something that looked very much like love. "Morning," she said, suddenly shy in the daylight. "Morning, wife." The way he said wife now held new meaning, new weight. "How do you feel?" She stretched, took inventory. There was a pleasant soreness in muscles she'd forgotten existed, whisker burn on her neck, a deep contentment in her chest. "Like I'm home." His smile was radiant. "You are home. This is your home, your land, your life now. No more running, no more looking over your shoulder. Just us." They rose and dressed, but the air between them crackled with new energy. Simple tasks became excuses to touch, his hand on her lower back as she passed, her fingers brushing his as she handed him his coffee. They were learning to be married in truth, not just in name, that day in town. People noticed the difference, the way Eli kept his hand on Cora's arm, possessive but protective, the way she glowed with new confidence, meeting curious gazes steadily instead of shrinking away. Even Harriet Claiborne's poisonous looks couldn't dim the light between them. "Let them talk," Eli said when they passed a group of whispering women. "They're just jealous of what we have." "And what's that?" Cora asked, though she thought she knew. "Something real, something that can weather any storm." That night, as they lay in their bed, truly their bed now, Cora told him things she'd never told anyone, about the nights in the workhouse when she'd thought about ending it all, about the guard who'd tried to force himself on her and how she'd fought him off with a broken bottle, earning a beating that left scars still visible on her back, about the kindness of Margaret Donnelly, who'd seen her humanity when everyone else saw only cheap labor. Eli listened without judgment, holding her when the memories became too much, kissing away her tears. When she finally fell silent, he shared his own darkness, the wife who died in his arms, burning with fever he couldn't break. The year of drinking that followed, the bar fights and cattle rustling, the close calls with the law before he'd pulled himself together and bought this ranch with his last dollar. "We're both broken in places," he said into the darkness. "But maybe broken things can fit together in ways whole ones can't. Like a puzzle," she agreed, finding his hand and lacing their fingers together. All jagged edges that somehow make a picture. They made love again as dawn approached, slow and sweet, sealing their confessions with touch and taste and whispered promises. When they finally rose to start the day's work, they moved as one unit, partners in every sense. Over the following weeks, the change in their relationship transformed everything else. The ranch felt alive in a way it hadn't before. Cora sang as she worked, and Eli smiled more in a day than he had in the previous months combined. They worked side by side during the day and came together at night with a passion that only grew stronger. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky crimson and gold, Cora said, "I never thanked you properly." "For what?" "For seeing me, not the rumors or the accusations or the ragged girl who stepped off that stage, but me." He pulled her closer, pressed a kiss to her temple. "You saw me too. Not just a lonely rancher looking for help, but a man who needed saving as much as you did. We saved each other," she said, and knew it was true. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared, they went inside together, to their bed, their home, their life. The past would always be there, scars on skin and soul that would never fully fade. But the future stretched before them, bright with possibility. built on the foundation of trust and desire and the fierce, protective love that had grown between them. Tomorrow there would be work and weather and the judgment of neighbors to face. But tonight there was just Eli and Cora, two souls who'd found their match in the unlikely soil of a Colorado ranch, proving that sometimes the most beautiful things grow in the harshest ground. The august heat had broken at last, giving way to the cooler winds of early September. Cora stood at the kitchen window, watching Eli work with a new horse in the corral, her hand resting unconsciously on her belly. 3 months had passed since they'd become husband and wife in truth. 3 months of a happiness she'd never dared imagine possible, which made the letter in her apron pocket all the more terrifying. It had arrived that morning with the supply wagon from town, her name written in spidery script she didn't recognize. The return address was Cheyenne. Inside, a single paragraph that made her blood run cold. Mrs. Thatcher, or should I say, Miss Sullivan, your past has not been forgotten. Certain interested parties have been asking questions about Margaret Donnelly's death. It would be unfortunate if new evidence were to surface, unless, of course, you were willing to ensure such evidence remained buried. $500 should suffice. You have 1 month. A friend. She'd read it 3 times before the meaning fully sank in. Blackmail. Someone knew where she was, knew about her past, and wanted money she and Eli didn't have. You're going to wear a hole in that window staring so hard. She jumped, not having heard Eli come in. He was dusty from working, his shirt damp with sweat, but his smile faded when he saw her face. What's wrong? She handed him the letter wordlessly, watched his expression darken as he read, saw his jaw clench when he reached the amount demanded. Burn it, he said, holding it back to her. Eli, burn it. We're not paying blood money to some coward who won't even sign their name. But what if they really have evidence? What if... He caught her hands, stilling their trembling. There is no evidence because you didn't do anything wrong. This is someone trying to make a quick profit off your fear. You don't know that. You don't know how convincing lies can be when people want to believe them. She pulled away, pacing the small kitchen. $500. We don't have that kind of money. Wouldn't matter if we did. You pay a blackmailer once. You pay forever. She knew he was right, but the fear that had lived in her gut for so long was roaring back to life. I should leave, disappear before... No, the word cracked like a whip. You're not running anymore. We face this together, like we promised. This isn't your fight. The hell it isn't. He crossed to her, gripped her shoulders gently but firmly. You're my wife. Your fights are my fights. That's what marriage means. She looked up at him, this man who'd taken her in, who'd given her a home and hope in his heart without reservation. I can't let my past destroy what we've built. Then don't. Fight for it instead. His hands moved to cup her face. Trust me, Cora. Trust us. She wanted to. God, how she wanted to. But the old instincts were hard to shake. That night, she lay awake despite Eli's solid presence beside her, staring at the ceiling and planning escape routes she prayed she'd never need. 3 days later, Eli announced they were going to Denver. What? Why? Business. Need to see a man about some cattle. Figured you might enjoy seeing the city, picking up some things we can't get in Willow Creek. She studied his face. Suspicious. This doesn't have anything to do with that letter? Everything I do has to do with keeping you safe, he said simply. Come with me. Let me show you you're not alone in this. The journey to Denver took 2 days. They stayed in a boarding house the first night, and Cora found herself clinging to Eli in the unfamiliar room. Memories of other boarding houses making her skin crawl. He held her without complaint, whispering reassurances until she finally slept. Denver was overwhelming. So many people. So much noise after months of ranch solitude. But Eli navigated it with surprising confidence, keeping her close as they made their way through the busy streets. Their first stop was a law office in a respectable brick building. The nameplate read, Harrison Blackwood, attorney at law. Eli, Cora hissed, pulling back. We can't afford a lawyer. Harry's an old friend. Come on. Harrison Blackwood was nothing like Cora expected. Young, perhaps 35, with intelligent eyes and ink-stained fingers. His face lit up when he saw Eli. "Eli Thatcher, you old rustler, it's been too long." "Harry." They shook hands warmly. "This is my wife, Cora." "Ma'am." Harry bowed slightly. "Eli wrote me about your situation. Please, sit. Tell me everything." Cora found herself spilling the whole story. Margaret's death, the accusations, her flight, and now the blackmail letter. Harry listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. "May I see the letter?" She produced it from her bag. Harry studied it carefully, even holding it up to the light. First, this is definitely blackmail, which is illegal. Second, the handwriting and paper are distinctive. Third, and most importantly, they claim to have evidence but offer no specifics. This suggests they have nothing but hope that fear will make you pay. But what if, Mrs. Thatcher, I've already been in contact with the authorities in Cheyenne. There's no active warrant for your arrest. The case was closed months ago when Dr. Pemberton refused to support any criminal charges. You're not a fugitive." Cora felt her knees go weak. "I'm not?" "No, ma'am. Whatever Harriet Claiborne told people, the law considers the matter closed." "Then who's sending these letters?" Eli asked. "Someone who knows enough to exploit Mrs. Thatcher's fears, but not enough to realize the case is dead. I suspect someone from Cheyenne who recently discovered your whereabouts." Harry leaned back. "I recommend we set a trap." "No," Cora said immediately. "I won't risk—" "Hear him out," Eli said gently. Harry outlined his plan. They would arrange to pay the blackmail, but have the law waiting. The blackmailer would be arrested, and any threat would be eliminated permanently. "It's dangerous," Cora protested. "Less dangerous than living in fear," Eli countered. "Less dangerous than you trying to run again." She looked between the two men, saw their determination to protect her, and felt something crack open inside her chest. "All right," she whispered. "All right." They spent 2 more days in Denver while Harry made arrangements. Eli took her to a proper dress shop, insisting she needed new clothes despite her protests about the expense. "My wife isn't going to face down her past in patched rags," he said firmly. "You'll stand tall, look them in the eye, and show them Cora Thatcher isn't afraid anymore." The night before they returned home, they stayed in a nicer hotel. As they lay in the comfortable bed, so different from their simple rope-strung frame at the ranch, Cora said, "You knew the case was closed, didn't you, before we even came here? Harry wrote me last month, but you needed to hear it from him, not me. You could have just told me. Would you have believed it? Or would you have thought I was just trying to keep you from running?" His arm tightened around her. "You needed to know the truth from someone with no stake in keeping you." She turned in his arms, kissed him deeply. "How did I get so lucky?" "Luck had nothing to do with it. We were meant to find each other. Cora, 2 broken souls who make a whole." They made love slowly, savoring each touch, each whispered endearment. Later, as Eli slept, Cora lay awake, but for once not from fear. Instead, she was planning, not escape, but a future. A real future with the man beside her. The trap was set for 2 weeks hence. The blackmailer had instructed that the money be left at a specific location outside Willow Creek. Harry arranged for a federal marshal to be present, hidden but ready. As the day approached, Cora grew increasingly nervous. She jumped at shadows, burned dinner twice, and clung to Eli at night like she was drowning. He weathered it all with patient love, never complaining when she woke him with nightmares or needed reassurance for the 100th time. The morning of the drop, Cora was sick with anxiety. "I'm coming with you," she announced as Eli prepared to leave. "Absolutely not. You can't go alone." "What if it's dangerous? What if you stay here where it's safe and let me and the marshal handle this?" He cupped her face, kissed her softly. "Trust me to protect you, please." She wanted to argue, but saw the wisdom in his words. "Come back to me," she whispered, Promise you'll come back. Always." He swore, and then he was gone. The hours that followed were the longest of Cora's life. She tried to work, but couldn't focus, started a dozen tasks and finished none. Finally, she simply sat on the porch, watching the road, waiting. It was near sunset when she saw the dust cloud of approaching riders. Her heart leaped, then plummeted when she realized there were 3 horses. Not one. Eli, a man in a marshal's badge, and— "No," she breathed. Harriet Claiborne rode between them, her hands bound, her face twisted with fury. Of course. Who else would have known enough, hated enough, to try this scheme? Cora stood on shaking legs as they approached. Harriet's eyes found hers, blazing with malice. "You little witch!" she spat. "You've ruined everything!" "Ma'am, that's enough," the marshal said firmly. He tipped his hat to Cora. "Mrs. Thatcher, your husband's quick thinking prevented this woman from escaping. She's confessed to the blackmail and will be facing federal charges." "But why?" Cora asked Harriet. "What did I ever do to you?" Harriet laughed bitterly. "You existed, young and pretty, making poor Margaret smile when she'd never smiled at me. Then when she died, her will left everything to charities. Not a cent to me after all my years running that place. I needed someone to blame, someone to punish. You were convenient, so you destroyed my life for spite." "Your life?" Harriet's voice rose. "What about my life? 40 years of cooking and cleaning and scraping by, and what do I have to show for it? Nothing, while you land on your feet with a husband and a ranch and—" She cut off, her face purpling. "That's enough," the marshal said. "Mrs. Thatcher, we'll need you to come to town tomorrow to give a statement, but this matter should be resolved quickly. This woman won't be troubling you again." As they led Harriet away, still spitting invectives, Cora felt her knees buckle. Eli caught her, held her up, held her close. "It's over," he murmured into her hair. "It's finally over." But it wasn't, quite. There was still the statement to give, papers to sign. The next day in town, Cora held her head high as she walked into the marshal's office. Eli at her side. People stared, whispered, but she met their gazes steadily. The truth spread quickly. How Harriet had fabricated evidence, spread lies, driven an innocent woman to flee. How she'd tried to profit from her cruelty. Some who had believed the worst of Cora now looked ashamed. Others, like Sam Mackenzie, nodded approval at seeing justice done. That night, as they lay in bed at the ranch, Cora said, "I feel like I can breathe for the first time in years. No more looking over your shoulder." Eli agreed. "No more fear, just us and whatever future we choose to build." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Eli, what would you think about that future, including a child?" He went very still. "Cora, are you—" "I think so. I'm almost certain." She bit her lip. "Are you happy?" For an answer, he kissed her breathless, his hands reverent on her still flat belly. "A baby," he said with wonder. "Our baby, our future," she corrected, and kissed him again. Outside, the September moon rose full and bright over the Colorado plains. Inside, 2 souls who had found each other against all odds celebrated the promise of new life, new hope, and a love strong enough to conquer any shadow from the past. The letter that had threatened to destroy everything had instead led to freedom. And in that freedom, Cora Thatcher finally found what had eluded her for so long. Not just safety or shelter, but home, true home, built on love and trust and the knowledge that whatever came next, she would never face it alone. Spring arrived early that year, painting the prairie with wildflowers and filling the air with the sound of returning birds. Cora moved slowly these days, her belly round with child, but her spirit soared with each new bloom in her garden. The fear that had haunted her for so long had faded like morning mist, replaced by a deep contentment she'd never thought possible. It had been 6 months since Harriet's arrest, and the change in how the town treated her was remarkable. Women who had once whispered now stopped to ask after her health. Sam Mackenzie always had a piece of candy for the little one whenever she visited the store, even the minister's wife. Stern Mrs. Abernathy had softened enough to invite her to the church quilting circle. "You're glowing," Doc Brennan announced after examining her one afternoon in late April. "Everything looks perfect. Baby should arrive sometime in June." Eli, who had insisted on being present for every appointment despite it being unusual, squeezed her hand. "Hear that? Perfect." As they rode home, Cora leaned against her husband's shoulder. "I never imagined I could be this happy," she said softly. "Sometimes I wake up afraid it's all a dream." "It's real," he assured her, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Every bit of it." That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, a rider appeared on the horizon. Eli tensed, his hand moving instinctively to the rifle that was never far from reach these days. But as the figure drew closer, Cora gasped. Sarah, her sister, older, careworn, but unmistakably Sarah, dismounted with obvious exhaustion. They hadn't seen each other in over 10 years, not since before their father died. "Cora," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "I've been looking for you for so long." The reunion was tearful and complicated. Sarah had married young to escape their stepfather, only to lose her husband to fever 2 years ago. She'd spent months tracking Cora down, following rumors and old trails. "I heard about the trouble in Cheyenne," Sarah said as they sat around the kitchen table. "I knew it couldn't be true. You wouldn't hurt a fly, even when we were children. How did you find me?" "A lawyer in Denver, Mr. Blackwood. He wouldn't give me your address directly, but he agreed to send a letter. When you didn't reply, I decided to come myself." Cora exchanged glances with Eli. They'd never received a letter. "When did he send it?" 3 months ago, maybe more. Around the time of the worst winter storms. Mail often went missing in bad weather. Cora reached for her sister's hand. "I'm glad you're here now." Sarah's eyes moved to Cora's obvious pregnancy. "You're married. Happy. I'm so relieved." "This is Eli," Cora said proudly. "My husband, my salvation. Really." Eli shifted uncomfortably at the praise. "Your sister saved herself. I just gave her a place to do it." Over the next days, the sisters caught up on lost years. Sarah told of her marriage to a kind but poor farmer, their struggle to make ends meet, his death leaving her with nothing but debts. Cora shared her own journey, though she softened the worst parts. "I have some money saved," Sarah said one evening. "Not much, but enough to start over somewhere. Maybe California. I hear there's opportunity there." "Stay," Cora said impulsively. "At least for a while. We have room, and I could use help when the baby comes." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I couldn't impose—" "Your family," Eli interrupted. "Family doesn't impose." So Sarah stayed, taking the loft while Eli and Cora remained in their bedroom. Having her sister near brought Cora a joy she hadn't expected. They cooked together, worked the garden together, shared memories of their mother and happier times. But not everyone in town was pleased with the new addition. One day at the general store, Cora overheard Mrs. Henderson, the banker's wife, whispering to her companion. "First she arrives in rags with a sordid past. Now her family starts appearing. Mark my words. We'll have a whole clan of beggars before long." Cora's cheeks burned, but before she could respond, a familiar voice cut through the gossip. "Mrs. Henderson, I believe you've forgotten your manners." It was Mrs. Abernathy, the minister's wife, fixing the banker's wife with a stern glare. "Mrs. Thatcher has proven herself a valuable member of our community. Her sister is welcome here, as should be any family of our neighbors. Perhaps you should concern yourself less with others' affairs and more with your own soul's condition." Mrs. Henderson flushed and hurried out. "Mrs. Abernathy turned to Cora with a slight smile. "Pay her no mind. Dear, prosperity makes some people small instead of generous." That evening, Cora related the incident to Eli and Sarah. "I couldn't believe it. 6 months ago, Mrs. Abernathy wouldn't even look at me." "People can change," Eli said. "Sometimes they just need time to see past their first impressions, or sometimes they need to see someone stand up for what's right." Sarah added, smiling at her brother-in-law. Cora told me how you defended her from the beginning. That kind of loyalty inspires others. As Cora's pregnancy progressed, the small house filled with preparations, Sarah proved skilled with a needle, creating tiny gowns and blankets. Eli built a cradle with painstaking care, sanding it smooth as silk. The ranch hands. Tom Morrison and young Jake Sullivan, no relation, despite the name, painted the hen house and repaired the garden fence without being asked. Baby's going to be spoiled rotten. Cora laughed one evening, surveying the growing pile of preparations. As it should be, Eli said firmly, "Our child will have everything we didn't." The words hung heavy for a moment. All three of them had known want, loss, loneliness. But here, now, they were building something different. On a warm June morning, Cora woke with a backache that quickly revealed itself as something more. Sarah ran for Doc Brennan while Eli stayed with Cora, his face pale but his hands steady. "I'm scared," Cora admitted between contractions. "I'm right here," he promised, "not going anywhere." The labor was long but uncomplicated. As the sun set, filling the room with golden light, their daughter entered the world with a lusty cry that brought tears to Eli's eyes. "Perfect," Doc Brennan announced, placing the baby in Cora's arms. "Absolutely perfect." They named her Margaret Grace. Margaret for the kind woman whose death had inadvertently brought them together, and Grace for the second chance they'd both been given. "She has your eyes," Eli murmured, touching the baby's tiny fist with one finger. "And your stubborn chin." Cora replied, exhausted but radiant. Sarah peeked in, her face soft with wonder. "She's beautiful. May I?" Cora nodded, and Sarah carefully took her niece, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Hello, little one. I'm your Aunt Sarah. I'm going to spoil you terrible." The days that followed were a blur of feedings and diapers and the sweet exhaustion of new parenthood. Eli proved surprisingly adept with the baby, walking her for hours when she fussed, singing off-key lullabies that somehow always worked. Neighbors came to visit, bringing food and gifts, even Mrs. Henderson appeared with a beautifully embroidered blanket, her manner subdued and almost apologetic. "People really have accepted us," Cora marveled one evening as she nursed Margaret. "You've given them reason to." Sarah said, "Your kindness to everyone." Eli's fair dealings, the way you've both contributed to the community. You've earned their respect. But it was more than that. Cora knew. It was the power of redemption made visible. People had seen her arrive broken and suspicious, watched her bloom under love's patient tending, witnessed her transformation from runaway to respected rancher's wife. It gave them hope for their own second chances. One night, when Margaret was about a month old, Cora woke to find Eli's side of the bed empty. She found him in the main room, holding their daughter, speaking softly to her. "Your mama is the bravest person I know," he was saying. "She faced down more troubles than anyone should have to, and she came through with her heart still soft. You're lucky to have her. We both are." "Eli," Cora said softly. He looked up, not embarrassed to be caught. "Couldn't sleep. Figured I'd let you rest and spend some time with our miracle." She joined them, curling into his side, their daughter between them. "Do you ever think about how unlikely this all is? If Harriet hadn't lied, if I hadn't run, if you hadn't placed that advertisement, I don't think it was chance." Eli said, "I think sometimes people are meant to find each other, no matter how winding the path." Sarah emerged from the loft then, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Is everything all right?" "Everything's perfect," Cora said. "Want to hold your niece?" They sat together in the lamplight, a family forged not just by blood, but by choice, by loyalty, by the decision to trust in love despite all reasons not to. Outside, a warm breeze carried the scent of Cora's blooming garden, the roses she'd planted climbing already toward the stars. "I've been thinking," Sarah said quietly, "about California. I don't think I want to go anymore." "No?" Cora tried not to sound too hopeful. "This feels like home. If you'll have me, I'd like to stay. Help with the ranch, with Margaret. Build something here. Of course you'll stay, Eli said immediately. We'll build you a proper cabin before winter. Can't have you in that loft forever. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to thank you. Family, Cora interrupted. Doesn't need to thank. Family just is. As dawn broke over the ranch, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, 3 adults and 1 perfect baby welcomed the new day together. The past, with all its pain and running and fear, felt very far away. What mattered was this moment, this child, this love, this unlikely family who'd found each other across miles and years of hardship. Look, Eli said, pointing through the window. The roses are blooming. And they were, great crimson blooms opening to the morning sun, their beauty all the more precious for having grown in hard soil, tended by hands that had known thorns but chose to plant anyway. Like love, like hope, like the life they'd built together against all odds. Cora kissed her daughter's downy head, then her husband's weathered cheek. Thank you, she whispered. For everything. Thank you, he replied. For saying yes to my advertisement, to this life, to us. In her aunt's arms, baby Margaret cooed, as if agreeing, and in that sound was all the promise of the future, bright and whole, and theirs for the taking. The morning of their wedding dawned crisp and clear, with the September sun painting the ranch in shades of gold. It had been over a year since Cora first arrived, and though they'd been married by law all that time, this ceremony would be different, a true celebration of the love they'd found, witnessed by the community that had come to embrace them. Cora stood before the small mirror in their bedroom, adjusting the crown of wildflowers Sarah had woven for her. Her dress was simple but new, made of soft blue cotton that brought out her eyes. Margaret, now 3 months old, cooed from her cradle, watched over by her doting aunt. You look beautiful, Sarah said softly. Mama would be so proud. I wish she could be here, Cora replied, her voice thick with emotion. She is, in a way, in you, in Margaret, in this happiness you've built. A knock at the door interrupted them. Ladies, Tom Morrison called. The Reverend's here, and Eli's about wearing a groove in the ground with his pacing. Cora laughed, the melancholy moment passing. Tell him we're coming. The ceremony was held in the meadow behind the house, where Cora's garden bloomed in riotous color. Neighbors had come from miles around, Sam and Martha Mackenzie, Doc Brennan and his wife, the Johnsons from the neighboring ranch, even Mrs. Abernathy with her stern face softened by a genuine smile. The only notable absence was the Henderson family, but Cora found she didn't mind. Eli stood beneath an arch of woven branches and late roses, looking uncomfortable in his Sunday best but radiating joy. When he saw her approaching on Tom's offered arm, since she had no father to give her away, his face lit up like sunrise. Reverend Abernathy, a tall, gentle man with kind eyes, began the ceremony with words about redemption and second chances that felt particularly fitting. When he asked if anyone objected to the union, the silence was profound, not the tense silence of their legal marriage in the courthouse months ago, but the peaceful quiet of community approval. I understand you've written your own vows, the Reverend said. Eli cleared his throat, pulling a creased paper from his pocket. His hands shook slightly as he unfolded it. Cora, he began, his voice rough with emotion. When you stepped off that stage, I thought I was just getting help for the ranch. I never imagined I was meeting the person who would make this place a home. You've brought light to my darkness, laughter to my silence, and love to a heart I thought was too scarred to feel again. I promise to protect you, provide for you, and cherish you, not because a paper says I should, but because I can't imagine doing anything else. You're my sunrise, my sunset, and all the stars between. Cora was crying openly by the time he finished. She had no paper, but the words came anyway. Eli, you gave me shelter when I had nowhere to go, but more than that, you gave me dignity when I had none left, hope when I'd forgotten what it looked like, and love when I thought I didn't deserve it. You saw past my rags and my fear to the person I could be, And then you waited patiently while I became her. I promised to stand beside you through whatever comes, to be your partner in work and rest, in plenty and want, in joy and sorrow. You're not just my husband. You're my best friend, my safe harbor, and the love I never dared dream of finding. The rings? Reverend Abernathy prompted. Jake Sullivan stepped forward, grinning, to hand over the simple gold bands they'd ordered from Denver. As Eli slipped the ring onto Cora's finger, he whispered, "No more walls between us. No more running," she whispered back, placing his ring. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you, again, husband and wife. Eli, you may kiss your bride." The kiss was sweet and lingering, drawing applause from their gathered friends. Margaret chose that moment to wake and cry, causing laughter to ripple through the crowd. "She wants to be part of the celebration," Martha Mackenzie called out. Sarah brought the baby to them, and they stood together, a complete family, surrounded by acceptance and love. The reception was held in the yard, with tables groaning under the weight of dishes the neighbor women had brought. There was dancing to Tom's fiddle playing, toasts with Sam's homemade wine, and more laughter than the ranch had heard in years. As the sun began to set, Cora found herself standing apart for a moment, watching the celebration. Doc Brennan joined her, his wise eyes twinkling. "Quite a change from last year," he observed. "I can hardly believe it's real," she admitted. "Believe it. You and Eli have given this community something precious, proof that people can change, that second chances are possible, that love can bloom even in the hardest ground." He patted her shoulder paternally. "You've earned every bit of this happiness." Later, as the guests began to depart, each one stopped to offer congratulations and gifts, preserves and quilts, tools and promises of help with the fall harvest. The Johnsons presented them with a young milk cow for the little one. But it was Mrs. Abernathy's gift that touched Cora most deeply. The stern woman pressed a small, worn Bible into her hands. "This was my mother's," she said quietly. "She always said it should go to someone who understood that grace isn't just a word, it's a lived truth. I think she would have wanted you to have it." Cora hugged the older woman, too moved for words. As the last wagon rolled away and quiet settled over the ranch, the little family gathered on the porch. Sarah held Margaret while Eli and Cora sat close together on the bench he'd built that spring. It was perfect. Cora sighed contentedly. "You're perfect," Eli corrected, kissing her temple. "I should put Margaret to bed," Sarah said, recognizing the moment. "And then I think I'll turn in early. It's been a long, wonderful day." When they were alone, Eli stood and offered Cora his hand. "Dance with me? There's no music. Don't need any." They swayed together under the stars, her head on his shoulder, his arms strung around her. The night sounds of the ranch, cattle lowing, crickets chirping, the distant howl of a coyote, provided all the symphony they needed. "I have something for you," Eli said eventually, leading her inside. From a drawer, he pulled out a wooden box she'd never seen before. "I've been working on this for months." Inside was a gold locket on a delicate chain. He opened it to reveal two tiny photographs, one of Margaret, the other of Eli himself. "Where did you get photographs?" she gasped. "That traveling photographer who came through last month. I tracked him down, paid him to come back." He fastened the chain around her neck. "Wanted you to always have us close to your heart." "Oh, Eli." She touched the locket reverently. "It's beautiful, but I don't have anything for you." "You've given me everything," he interrupted. "A daughter, a real family, a reason to wake up smiling. That's gift enough for a lifetime." They retired to their room, where the marriage bed was scattered with rose petals. Sarah's doing, no doubt. The night that followed was a celebration of their own, a reaffirmation of the vows they'd spoken, a physical expression of the love that words could only approximate. "I love you," Cora whispered into the darkness afterward. "I love our life, our family, our home. I love who I've become with you." "And I love who you've always been," Eli replied, "even when you couldn't see it yourself." They were quiet for a moment. Then Cora said, "I've been thinking about what Doc Brennan said, about second chances and grace. What about it? I want to help other women who are running, who need what I needed. Maybe we could take in a girl sometimes, someone who needs work and safety. Give them the same chance you gave me." Eli pulled her closer. "I think that's a fine idea. This place is big enough for more than just us." Sarah's been thinking about the future too. She mentioned maybe starting a school for the local children. She's got the education for it. Also a fine idea. Ranch is doing well enough we could donate the land. Help build it. Look at us, Cora said with a soft laugh. Planning to change the world from our little corner of Colorado. We've already changed our world, Eli pointed out. Why not spread it around a little? The next morning brought the pleasant chaos of normal life. Margaret fussing for her breakfast, chickens to feed, cows to milk, all the daily rhythms of ranch life. But everything felt touched with extra sweetness. The ordinary made extraordinary by the love that suffused it all. Sarah had prepared a special breakfast, and as they sat around the table, she raised her coffee cup. To new beginnings, she toasted. To family, Eli added. To home. Cora finished. As if in agreement, Margaret gurgled happily from her high chair, waving her wooden spoon like a tiny conductor orchestrating their joy. After breakfast, Cora walked through her garden, touching the flowers that had grown so well in the mountain soil. The roses were especially beautiful this year. Climbing high on the trellises Eli had built, their blooms heavy with morning dew. She thought about the woman she'd been when she arrived, frightened, hollow, certain that happiness was for other people, people who hadn't made mistakes or suffered losses. That woman seemed like a stranger now, though Cora carried her still, with compassion rather than shame. "Mama!" Margaret's voice called out. She was just learning to talk, and Mama was her favorite word. Cora turned to see Eli carrying their daughter, her chubby arms reaching out. "There are my loves," Cora said, taking Margaret and spinning her around until she shrieked with laughter. "Sarah's got an idea for the school location," Eli said. "Want to come look?" They spent the morning walking the property, planning and dreaming. The school would go on the flat piece near the creek, close enough to town for easy access, but still on Thatcher land. They'd plant trees for shade, build a playground, make it a place where children could learn and grow and believe in possibilities. "You know what this means," Sarah said, eyes bright with excitement. "We're not just building a school. We're building a community, a future." That afternoon, a wagon appeared on the horizon. Cora shaded her eyes, not recognizing the vehicle. As it drew closer, she saw it contained a young woman, barely more than a girl, with a split lip and frightened eyes. "Please," the girl said when the wagon stopped. I heard this was a safe place, that you help women who need work. I can work. I'm not afraid of hard work." Cora looked at Eli, who nodded slightly. Then she stepped forward, remembering another frightened woman who'd arrived with nothing but hope. "You're safe here," she said gently. "Come inside. We'll get you fed and settled, and then we can talk about the rest." As she led the girl, Lucy, her name was Lucy, into the house, Cora caught sight of their reflection in the window. The scared woman in rags was gone, replaced by someone strong and whole and capable of extending the same grace she'd received. That evening, with Lucy settled in the spare room Sarah had vacated for her cabin, the family gathered again on the porch. Margaret played at their feet while the adults talked quietly about the future, the school, the ranch, the ways they could continue to build something good in this harsh but beautiful land. "No regrets?" Eli asked Cora softly as the stars began to appear. "How could I regret the path that led me to you?" she replied. "To this." He kissed her then, sweet and sure, while Sarah hummed a lullaby to Margaret and the ranch settled into peaceful night. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and joys, but tonight everything was perfect. The mail-order bride who'd arrived in rags had found so much more than shelter. She'd found love, purpose, family, and the truth that sometimes the most beautiful gardens grow in the most unlikely soil. All it takes is someone willing to plant the seeds and someone patient enough to tend them until they bloom. The autumn wind carried a bite that promised an early winter. Cora stood at the window, watching Eli and Tom Morrison driving the cattle to lower pastures. At 18 months old, Margaret toddled around her feet, chattering in the mix of words and babble that never failed to make Cora's heart swell. "Mama, up!" Margaret demanded, raising her chubby arms. Cora lifted her daughter, pointing out the window. "See, Papa? He's working hard to keep us safe and warm this winter." It had been 6 months since their wedding celebration, 6 months of building the life they'd dreamed of. The school construction was nearly complete, with Sarah overseeing every detail. Lucy, the young woman who'd arrived seeking shelter, had blossomed into a valuable help around the ranch, her initial fear replaced by quiet confidence. But this morning had brought a new challenge. A letter had arrived from Denver, from a man named William Garrett claiming to be Carl Mason's brother, Cora's step-uncle. He was coming to discuss family matters and would arrive within the week. Cora hadn't told Eli yet. Part of her wanted to burn the letter, pretend it never came. But she'd learned that running from problems only made them grow in the darkness. That evening, after Margaret was asleep, Cora showed Eli the letter. His face darkened as he read. "What do you think he wants?" she asked. "Money, most likely. Men like that always want money." Eli set the letter aside, taking her hands. "Whatever he wants, we face it together. No more secrets, no more running. What if he tries to take Margaret? Claim some kind of family, right? Over my dead body." Eli said flatly, "And I mean that literally. No one takes our daughter." 3 days later, William Garrett arrived. He was a thin, oily man with calculating eyes and clothes that tried too hard to appear prosperous. Cora recognized the type immediately. A schemer, someone who lived off others' misfortune. "Niece," he said, tipping his hat with false courtesy, "you've done well for yourself. State your business, Mr. Garrett," Eli said coldly. Positioning himself slightly in front of Cora, Garrett's smile was unpleasant. "Direct, I like that. Very well. I've come about my brother's debt. The one dear Cora ran off without settling. I owed Carl Mason nothing," Cora said firmly. "He sold me like property. Any debt was his invention." "Ah, but I have papers that say otherwise." Garrett produced a document from his coat. "Signed by you, agreeing to work off the sum of $500. Cora shook her head. "I never signed anything." "Your word against documentation." Garrett's eyes glittered. "Of course, I'm a reasonable man. I understand you've built a life here. I'd hate to see it disrupted. Perhaps we could come to an arrangement, say $300, and this all goes away." "Get off my land," Eli said quietly. Now. No need for hostility. I could take this to the courts, drag your wife's name through the mud again, and who knows what other unsavory details might emerge. I've been doing some research. Did you know there are still people in Wyoming who believe she killed that old woman?" Cora felt the familiar ice of fear in her veins. But before she could speak, another voice cut through the tension. "Mr. Garrett, I presume." Harrison Blackwood stood in the doorway, accompanied by Marshall Thompson. The lawyer's smile was sharp as a blade. "I'm Mr. Thatcher's attorney. I understand you're attempting extortion." Garrett's face paled. "I don't know what you mean. I'm simply trying to collect a lawful debt. May I see this supposed document?" Harrison examined the paper, then laughed. "Mr. Garrett, I hope you didn't pay much for this forgery. The ink is barely dry, and whoever created it didn't realize that the Denver workhouse closed 2 years before this was supposedly signed. More importantly," Marshall Thompson added, stepping forward, "attempting to blackmail Mrs. Thatcher is a federal offense, one I take very seriously." "You can't prove—" "Actually, we can," Harrison interrupted. "You see, we've been expecting you. Carl Mason's been bragging in saloons from here to Kansas about how his brother was going to make him rich off his stepdaughter's good fortune. We have multiple witnesses, Garrett's oily confidence evaporated. "Now wait just a minute. You have two choices," the marshal said. "Leave Colorado today and never contact the Thatchers again, or face arrest for attempted extortion, forgery, and fraud. Which will it be?" Garrett looked between them all, his face twisting with rage. His eyes landed on Cora. "You always were more trouble than you were worth, just like your mother." Eli moved so fast Cora barely saw it. His fist connected with Garrett's jaw, sending the man sprawling in the dirt. "That's for insulting my wife," Eli said calmly. "Marshal, I apologize for the disturbance." Thompson's lips twitched. "What disturbance? I saw a man trip and fall. Happens all the time." Garrett scrambled to his feet, holding his bleeding nose. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is," Harrison said firmly. "Unless you'd prefer we investigate your brother's business practices more thoroughly. I'm sure there are other young women who'd be interested in justice." The threat landed. Garrett backed toward his horse, his face ugly with defeat. "You'll regret this," he snarled. But the words were empty. They watched him ride away, dust clouding in his wake. Only when he was out of sight did Cora allow herself to sag against Eli. "How did you know?" she asked Harrison. The lawyer smiled. "Eli wired me the day the letter arrived. We've been preparing ever since. Your husband doesn't take chances with your safety." "Thank you," she said, including the marshal in her gratitude. "Both of you. Just doing our jobs." Thompson said, "Though I admit, it's satisfying when the job involves protecting good people from vultures." After they left, promising to ensure Garrett actually departed Colorado, Cora and Eli sat on the porch in silence. Margaret played at their feet, blissfully unaware of the drama that had just unfolded. "You hit him," Cora said finally. "He insulted you, and your mother—" "My mother would have been horrified by the violence," Cora said, but she was smiling. "She also would have been grateful." "I'd do it again," Eli said simply. 100 times over." That night, as they prepared for bed, Cora said, "I keep waiting for the past to finally let me go. Maybe it never fully does." Eli replied, pulling her close, "Maybe we just get stronger. Build walls of love and family so high that the past can't climb over them anymore." "When did you become so wise?" "About the time a scared woman in rags taught me that broken things can be beautiful." They made love with a tenderness born of weathering another storm together. Afterward, Cora lay listening to Eli's heartbeat, marveling at the peace she felt. Garrett's visit should have shattered her, but instead, she felt stronger than ever. She had people who would fight for her, a community that stood by her, a love that could weather any assault. The next morning brought unexpected joy. Sarah burst into the house, eyes shining. "The school's first enrollment! 15 children! Cora, 15 families trust us with their children's education!" They celebrated with coffee and the cake Lucy had learned to make, Margaret smearing frosting across her face with gleeful abandon. Tom Morrison stopped by to report that the cattle were settled in their winter pastures, and Jake Sullivan brought news that the hay harvest had been the best in years. "We're blessed," Cora said that evening, surveying their domain. The ranch sprawled before them, prosperous and peaceful. The school stood ready for its first students. Their daughter played happily, surrounded by people who loved her. "We've earned it," Eli corrected. "Every bit of it." A rider approached as the sun set, Doc Brennan, making his rounds. But his face was troubled as he dismounted. "Thought you should know," he said without preamble. "That Garrett fellow didn't leave alone. He met up with another man at the edge of town. They were talking, seemed angry." Eli's face hardened. "Description?" "Big man, rough-looking, scar across his left cheek." Cora's blood ran cold. "Jake Fowler. He was one of Carl's drinking companions. Mean as a snake and twice as dangerous." "We'll post watches," Eli decided. "Tom and Jake can take shifts. I'll wire the marshal." "No." Cora's voice was firm. "No more running. No more hiding. If they come, we face them." Doc Brennan nodded approvingly. "That's the spirit. And you won't face them alone. This community protects its own." Word spread quickly. By the next morning, the ranch had unexpected visitors. Sam Mackenzie with his hunting rifle, the Johnson brothers ready to help, even Mrs. Abernathy with a basket of food and a fierce expression. "Nobody threatens our schoolteacher's family," she declared. For 3 days, they waited. The ranch became a fortress of watchful eyes and ready hands. But the attack, when it came, was from an unexpected direction. Cora was in the garden with Margaret when she smelled smoke. Turning, she saw flames licking at the barn's roof. "Fire!" she screamed, scooping up Margaret and running for the house. Chaos erupted. Men came running with buckets, forming a line from the well. But even as they fought the barn fire, Cora saw movement near the house. Fowler, creeping toward the door. Without thinking, she grabbed Eli's rifle from its place by the door. "Stop right there!" Fowler turned, his scarred face twisting into a sneer. "Well, if it ain't Carl's little runaway, you've gotten bold." "I've gotten free," she corrected, keeping the rifle steady despite Margaret crying in her arm. "And you're trespassing. Your stepdaddy always said you were ungrateful. All he did for you, and you ran off. All he did was try to sell me like cattle." Her voice was steel. "But I'm not that frightened girl anymore." Fowler took a step forward. Cora fired, the bullet kicking up dirt at his feet. "The next one won't miss. You wouldn't dare. Try me." She chambered another round, one-handed. "I've got a daughter to protect and a life I won't let you destroy. Either leave now or leave in a pine box. Your choice." For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then Eli appeared around the corner, his own rifle trained on Fowler. Behind him came Tom, Jake Sullivan, and half a dozen neighbors. "You heard my wife," Eli said coldly. "Time to go." Fowler looked at the assembled defenders, calculated his odds, and spat in the dirt. "This ain't worth dying for. Carl can fight his own battles." He backed toward his horse, but Cora's voice stopped him. "Tell Carl something for me. Tell him Cora Sullivan is dead. There's only Cora Thatcher now, wife, mother, and woman who'll put a bullet in anyone who threatens her family. Make sure he understands that." Fowler mounted and rode off without another word. Only then did Cora lower the rifle, her hands beginning to shake. "The barn," she said weakly, "is saved." Sam Mackenzie reported, soot-streaked but smiling. "Caught it in time. Minor damage to the roof. Nothing that can't be fixed." Sarah appeared, reaching for Margaret. "Let me take her. You need to sit down before you fall down." They gathered in the house, neighbors, friends, family. Stories were told, backs were slapped, and somehow it turned into an impromptu celebration of community and courage. "Did you see her?" Jake Sullivan kept saying. "Cool as winter morning, baby on her hip and rifle steady as rock, if that don't beat all." "I wasn't cool," Cora protested. "I was terrified." "Courage isn't about not being scared," Mrs. Abernathy said firmly. "It's about doing what needs done despite the fear." As the evening wore on and neighbors gradually departed with promises to help repair the barn, Cora found herself on the porch with Eli, Margaret sleeping between them. "You were magnificent," he said softly. "My warrior wife. I just did what you've been doing all along, protecting what's ours. No more ghosts from the past after this. I think word will spread. Nobody will dare threaten Cora Thatcher again." She laughed, surprising herself. "You know what? I think you're right. I think we've finally put it all to rest." As if in response, Margaret stirred, murmuring "Mama" in her sleep. Cora smoothed her daughter's hair, marveling at this life they'd built from ashes and determination. "What are you thinking?" Eli asked. "About that scared girl who got off the stagecoach. She never could have imagined this, standing up to men like Fowler, being part of a community, having people willing to fight for her." She looked at her husband, this man who'd seen her worth when she couldn't. "You gave me all of this." "No," he corrected, kissing her gently. "We gave it to each other. That's what love does. It makes us brave enough to claim the life we deserve." The stars came out one by one, witnessing their quiet happiness. Tomorrow would bring barn repairs and school preparations and all the beautiful, ordinary chaos of their life. But tonight, They sat together on their porch, whole and safe and home. The mail-order bride who'd arrived in rags had found her happily ever after, not in some fairy tale perfection, but in the real, sometimes difficult, always worthwhile work of building a life with someone who saw her truly. She'd been stripped down to nothing and rebuilt herself into everything, proving that sometimes the greatest love stories begin with the courage to answer an advertisement and step onto a stagecoach toward an unknown future. In the distance, a coyote called to its mate, and somewhere in the darkness, an answer came back. Cora smiled, understanding the sentiment perfectly. She'd called out in her desperation, and love had answered. Everything else, the struggles, the triumphs, the community they'd built, had grown from that first tentative connection between two lonely souls. "Ready to go inside?" Eli asked. "In a moment," she said, wanting to hold on to this perfect instant a little longer. "I'm memorizing this, all of it, so I never forget how far we've come. We've got a lifetime to make more memories," he promised, and they did. A lifetime of sunrises and storms, of children's laughter and quiet evenings, of love that deepened with each passing season. The girl in rags had become a woman of substance, not through rescue, but through resilience, not through hiding, but through standing tall. And in the end, that made all the difference. Thank you so much for listening to this story of love, redemption, and second chances in the Wild West. I'm curious, where in the world are you enjoying this tale? Please leave a comment below to let me know. And don't forget to subscribe to the From Wild West channel for more authentic frontier stories. Share your thoughts about Cora and Eli's journey. Did their love story touch your heart as much as it touched mine? Your engagement helps bring these historical romances to life.